Now you may wonder what I'm doing here inside the bay of my 2007 Volkswagen Touareg with the rare twin-turbo V10 diesel engine. I gotta drop this thing in order to install new turbos. I've got a checklist of everything that needs to be done. I'm gonna be doing my best to follow that checklist in the order, and then I'll go ahead and post the procedures that I've documented for dropping the engine, including all the disconnections that I'm gonna be doing here at the top. So let's get started. So what I've got to do is find all the connections in here, everything from the power steering pump to the fuel filter to the electricals back here. All of this has to be disconnected here at the top, and I'm going to be doing that in this video. So the first thing I'm going to start with is this fuel filter. I'm going to take off most of the connections that I need. I know I've got a few bolts on here. I'm going to try a slightly different approach to where I only need to disconnect one of these fuel lines. Hopefully prevent some spill of very expensive diesel fuel, depending on where you are. All right, so these clips are always a pain to get off. I do have a hose clamp, but sometimes that takes longer. So we got that. Let's gently massage this fuel line off. Okay, got that. Grab a plug. If you don't have these little vacuum cap assortments, I'd highly recommend you get them. They basically will plug almost any size hole. It's just a matter of finding the size that you need right now, that I need. And I use them to stop fuel from spilling. So that one's too small, too thin. Grab one of these guys, see if we can stick it in there. There, so now we don't have any fuel draining from that. Let's get this other guy disconnected. Key thing is having all of your tools lined up and ready to go. Eventually you're going to know what size bolts go where, just like that. So now my 3/8. I'm going to suggest you all grab yourself a really nice headlamp. God, it makes every job so much easier to see. If you don't have one, I'm not going to tell you which one to get, but get one that's rechargeable by USB-C, something that has good lumens. You're going to need it. So I'm going to remove this air hose because it's kind of in my way. And what else do we have? So I got this guy, all of this. There we go. So all this is going to stay with the engine. As I disconnect it and take it out, we're going to take this guy off. I'm going to get a ton of diesel spill, so let me grab a towel here off camera. We're going to take that one off too. Good. So I call this step one of ruining your gloves. Poked myself and already made a hole. This is step one of the entire engine process once you get the clip off. So I am going to have to just gently persuade this from coming off. There we go. Cool. So all this can stay right up here while we drop the engine. All of these will stay up here, good. As you do this frequently, you'll probably learn a couple tips and tricks in order to not move a whole bunch of stuff. So let me grab a bungee cord. So you're going to take this and then just find a secure point over here, and we can hook all this up too. Okay. So now that I got the fuel filter out of the way, the next step is going to be removing the power steering reservoir. So that is held in by a couple of strange bolts. We're going to try not dumping it out or emptying it, because that's a pain to fill and it's very expensive. Okay, there's one of the main bolts. Now, in order to stay a bit organized, put your bolts back into the holes they came from. Don't let them lay around and roll around. No, they should be put away. Otherwise, you'll drop them like that. And that's open. We'll take that out here momentarily. This is our power steering reservoir. Oh, one of them is going to have to come out or off. How do I want to do that? Get that out of the way. Right, now that's going to dump a whole bunch of power steering fluid, so let's see if we can set that off to the side, drain it, get the hose manipulator, convincer, and oh, we got some flowing down, some dribblies. And unfortunately, I don't think I have any stoppers big enough for that. I think I used the biggest one that I had. There we go. Again, these are just kind of temporary, so that's in the way. That thing is still full. I don't know if you can see it on the video here, but there's a ton of oil in that reservoir hose, and that's not going to work. So what I'm going to do is I think I'm going to try to see if I can hold that up somehow. And how do I want to do that? If I just set it there, it'll hold, but I've got a hose clamp. I'm just going to put a nice big provided that doesn't fall out, we should be okay. We're going to, let's grab this a little better, loop that around the bottom, hook it up to another point where it can't fall off. Multiple points of attachment, there we go. So we got everything there. So everything from this side of the engine now is clear, with the exception of our ground. So let's work on our ground. That might not be ground. That actually might be the power cable. No, that's not ground. That is power. Ground somewhere else. So this is our 12 volt direct to positive. So we got to take this guy out. I think I'm going to have to now take a couple more of these guys off because they are in there. Yeah. Okay, so strut mount bolt. It's a 16er. That's got to come out. So So I know that's kind of hard to see. I'll try to point to it down there. So we'll grab that, as well as our extension. Cool. So this holds on one of the airbags or suspensions. Pretty sure all Touaregs have the airbag suspension or air ride suspension. So let's put our other screw back in. That's still attached to the There's a little trick about using these claws right here. So I put my bolt right in like that. And then this is obviously not to tighten, but it helps very much put the bolt back to where it should be. Okay, so I'm disconnecting the ground, I guess the battery connection, the power cable. It's held in right here. Note to self, don't grasp on the last few centimeters or millimeters of the hose. Okay, so now we can put this ground. I'm pretty sure that goes right to the starter, which is kind of neat. So got that off. Can I feed that underneath carefully? I think the answer is going to be a big fat resounding no. Yeah, yep. Positive attitude, I can do anything. Okay, so now we have to disconnect the few remaining connectors over here that go to the mass airflow sensor, manifold absolute pressure sensor, and the basics like that. So before we do that, let me see, I think I have everything on this side. To recap, on this side, we've disconnected our fuel filter along with our fuel cooler, our power steering fluid reservoir, and a handful of other cables on this side that were in the way. So everything on this side is all set for us to start dropping the engine. And next we're gonna go move over to the ECMs, which are in the windshield cowl here on the driver's side, or sorry, on the passenger side of the car. Here is where you find the ECU. So this engine control unit, or ECM, engine control module, is taken out by a handful of bolts. We're gonna start with the two 10 mil bolts holding this cover on. So there's one. And if I can get this slightly out of the way, here is bolt number 2. And we'll lift this metal bracket off and then put the screws back in momentarily. Let's disconnect our grounds. If you leave a ground disconnected, you're gonna have major issues. It could be anything from the car not starting to some of your electricals not working, modules coming offline. It's a lot of stuff that can go wrong if you don't connect them. So in this case, we will pull our cables. They're a slide type. So if you see how I'm grabbing these, I'm just pulling them. This one is going towards the driver's side, which would be a little easier if I had some more room. So here is one. Grab it and pull it. And this one is same thing. You'll hear them disconnect and they kind of just suck out. And let's go ahead and carefully grab these up. So we're going to grab one of these off. There we go. Volkswagen engineers really jam things in their cars to make the most efficient space of the engine bay here. I am so surprised that they had all this room. Okay, so there, comes right out. So this is our ECU, ECM, whatever you want to call it. They come in master and slave. So one of these is the master and one is the redundancy backup, and that's found right down here behind it. We're going to take that one out next, assuming I can get to it. So that I'll leave here temporarily so we know where it is and what it's for, or which one's which. And then here is your next one. So there's one more cable of the slave or secondary backup ECM. And there's the cable of the other one. Now, what worries me is that came out really easily, so I might need to go order some more plastic clips to hold that in. I don't want to do anything with that. I can't let it go anywhere. So, I'll set that guy there. That routes all the way around and back. Disconnect our grounds. I'll take out this block right here. I know it's up in the corner of the camera, but that's what's going to come out. Technically it's a 10mm bolt also, but it's hard to get those in because it's going on the outside of the bolt. Okay, so now I freed that up, so now I have room to take this cable out and then disconnect these grommets right here, and that grommet will flip right over. So that said, pan over. We've got now all of the cables disconnected from here, so we have our first set from here to here. Now it's hard to see. I'm gonna set those in. These are all the cables that I've got to get. So there's, I think, 3 connections in here that I have to disconnect. So there's a red one. So we're gonna take our pick, disconnect the red cable first. Then we got the white one and the black one. So we'll take this. By the way, if you are removing your alarm, say your alarm went dead because water, shouldn't bump the camera. Say your alarm went dead, your alarm is actually right under this box, but this box is like another 8 inches below what you see here. So it's not just like, oh, let me do this quickly. It's like way under here. So this is where you're gonna find your car alarm. It's buried way at the bottom. And all these cables have to come undone. You got to take them all out. That way you can lift this box up and get to the nest of wires that's under there. And then you can finally get to the alarm. So over here, let's rearrange. I told you this is really impromptu and you're just getting the full Monty here. We are going to reroute this wire that we just disconnected. Okay, we're going to take that and just drape it right over the engine once we get our connectors out. So this, bloop, is now free. Believe it or not, there's nothing under here, to my knowledge, that is actually connected to the car. So this is really the most that we have to disconnect right here in order to drop this engine and prepare it. The other things that we've got to do now are the wires that are for your oxygen sensors, post-cat, post-DPF, pre-cat, pre-DPF, blah, 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 blah. All that stuff is buried back here. So we're going to take those out as well. So the next thing that we're going to disconnect are the cables right here. They go to our glow plugs. So we have to free up all of these cables right here. Okay. So there's one starting at the bottom that goes to the air conditioning. That's a red one. So bloop. Took that guy out. So now we're here. We're gonna open up our cable connects. And then we're gonna take out our red bank of glow plugs. And then our black bank of glow plugs. And drape that down. So now we are free from here. Our cables, I have to figure out where they go. Our cables are all right here, so we can leave all that. We don't have much more to do. I am going to make sure that we get our Mass airflow sensor here on the passenger side disconnected. Good. And then we're going to tuck that away. If you're like me, make sure you double check everything so you don't mess up. Sometimes I double check something and I don't mess up. Other times I check nothing and I don't mess up on lucky days. So the next cables that we're going to disconnect are right here. So we got a mess. Let's do a little bit more housekeeping. Okay, so this mess right down here are all of the cables that go to the O2 sensors and everything else in the back. Now they're all color-coded, but I would still highly recommend you number them. Numbering is going to be very important because you want to know how they go in. They do really only go in one way, but best not to risk it. Okay. So here is my next one, 1, 2. Let's now there's an air hose here. There's a vacuum line here. Disconnect that and don't break anything. Very crucial. I'm probably just going to time lapse over this, so. All right, so tuck those out of the way. We're set. There is a line here that I will need to disconnect. You can see all of our connectors that feed back behind the engine. All of these are kind of wrapped in a foil sleeve. So that foil sleeve is a single set, if you will. So all of these right here should be free. And then we have one exhaust temperature sensor, I'm assuming here. Believe it or not, that is everything that needs to be done up here. We've done a lot of work so far. For right now, we're done with everything on top of the engine. Just a quick recap, what we've done is we've disconnected our power steering fluid reservoir, we've disconnected our fuel filter, the fuel cooler, and a handful of other connections up here. We've also taken out the engine control module, the ECM connectors, in order to toss all of our wiring harness up and over on top of the engine, so that way the engine can be lowered. And then ultimately what we just did a few minutes ago is we disconnected all of the cables that went to the oxygen sensors and EGR sensors. So we did quite a bit. Make sure you mark everything. I did. I think I marked them well enough. And they should go back relatively easily if you take your time. We'll do the assembly again at some point in another video. But right now, fuel and power steering related, electrical related, more electrical related. Those are the connections we took off here, as well as a handful of connectors that go to our glow plugs. So we're gonna stop there, take a pause, and continue on with a little bit of cleanup. So let's get cracking into the next sections of dropping this engine by going underneath the car and disconnecting what we need to under there.